I had a conversation with some months back, and he's about 12 years younger than us. And he's been playing volleyball for a long time, and so now he's got some injury. So a friend of his who is about our age told him that he should stop exercising because he's getting old. And then I said, that's not true. You don't stop exercising, you adapt, you change, right? You change the kind of exercises you do. I said, you can't just stop. Your body needs the exercise, right? And then I reminded him, I still play tennis, and I'm in my 50s. So it doesn't mean that as you age, you should stop activities. You're just going to become a blob, just sitting in a corner if you don't move the body, and it's just going to get worse and worse. And, I think he had a realization, oh yeah, that's true. I need to change what I'm doing, not stop completely. I said, yeah, maybe it's to, with all the jumping, right, with volleyball, just do something else, something else that is equally enjoyable but less taxing on the knees, or slow it down. Play with people who are not that quick, and and enjoy it. Yeah.
And it's good because, it's good that you're able to point that out, because there's a lot of people out there that don't know what to do. It was quite a few months ago, but we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago with a client. And when he first came to me, like, he's 2 years older than us. He first came to me about, he was seeing a chiropractor 3 times a week for his lower back, and he wasn't really getting much relief. And I'm always guided by the professionals. I'll have my own opinion, but I'll always work in with them.
Yeah.
And there was that issue, plus he was having issues with his knees, and he used to play football a long time ago. Anyway, this man's over 100 kilos, so he's not a light man, but his GP put it down to as an age thing. Just get used to it. It's an age. And I went, oh my God. Anyway, I couldn't see this problem with the back getting any better. And I just said, look, hear me out. I'd like you to go and see, there's an osteo that I use. Not all osteos are the same. It's like personal trainers, people that specialise in different things, and like any kind of profession. I'd like you to go and see this osteo that I use, just for a second opinion, because I've got a funny feeling it's something else. Because I've treated people with his condition, and I was working with top surgeons, with my client, and I knew what he was being prescribed by this top surgeon, and I was working with him, and I thought, and he was told to avoid all this. And I thought, no, it doesn't make sense. But anyway, I'll be guided, because there was no improvement. So he went and saw the osteo, and he was like, oh my God, just totally blown away. And he said, it's not what the problem was that he was told. It was actually coming from a different area, and he fixed it in one session. So he was like over the moon. And when I said to him about his, this age thing, because he couldn't lunge, and I'm not saying we have to do lunges, but we still have to do everyday things. We went from a lunge, just holding a stick, and then progressed into, just as a progression, now he's doing walking lunges with an overweight, like with a weight over his, it's an overhead walking lunge anyway. But his whole movement that he's just, progressed over time. We're looking back and reflecting on our conversation and saying, oh my God, if I'd listened to the GP, I would be absolutely in worse position than I am now. Mind you, I'm not getting anywhere. I would have been frustrated with being so-called, treated for this back injury, because he used to turn up in the sessions with the weight belt and, just to protect his back. And I thought, God, this is strange, Anyway, each their own. But over time, we're able to, address that. There's your problem.
Yeah.
I said, because if you go and see a GP or any professional,
they're not trained about exercising, so they don't. GPs, right? We're talking about GPs, not talking about people who specialize. So can you imagine the number of people, I think maybe more so with maybe our parents' generation, they give 100% trust to the doctors. Everything the doctors say is like, like God sent. I imagine how much harm, inverted commas, is being done on people due to the ignorance of the GPs. I hope we don't get censored on you.
Out of interest, is your GP, are they into any fitness? Oh, hell no.
Exactly. There's so many doctors who drink too much, who smoke too much.
Well, I used to treat a doctor. He was overseas and with his nutrition. And it was interesting because he was really tall and skinny. He worked about 70 to 80 hours a week, and his nutrition was just horrible, because he was living on the go all the time. So you wouldn't have breakfast. So his typical thing would be going out the door with a coffee. And then he'd get the medical staff, because he had a business, and they would normally get him something about 10 o'clock. And then, something about lunchtime, and then dinner. I mean, I knew his wife. I used to coach his wife as well. Absolutely beautiful. But he just didn't have enough time in the day. And his nutrition was horrible, because he was just living on adrenaline. He didn't smoke. He drank a little bit, but nothing excessive or anything like that. And then later on, I found out he committed suicide. And it was just devastating. I was training him online. It came across much later, just to do with all the mental health. And now here's a beautiful man that seemed to have it all together, but was just really overworked. I didn't know a lot about the mental side. I was talking to his wife a little bit, and I never saw that side of struggle or anything like that. So it came a real shock to me to think that he just don't know what's going on, So, but, mental health is so different to physical health as well.
Very, very different.
You'll never get anyone who's, feeling great about themselves, working out, just generally ever discourage somebody else from doing it. So when people sort of, people listening, that if they're in that circle of friends where, they want to do something and they're finding that they're being discouraged, take
a step back and ask, do these people really know what they're talking about? It's like going to someone who's a nun or a priest for marital advice. Lots of people do that. And why?
Well, it's interesting because when I was getting married, mind you, it was a long time ago. It was in 95 I got married. And so it must have been the year before. We had to, on the condition, we had to see the priest, 3 times, right? And then they were basically going to determine whether he felt that your marriage was going to be successful. Anyway, he said ours wasn't going to be based on my mother's 2 failed marriage and my husband to be. His parents, they were together for like 23 years before their marriage fell apart. I mean, but there's a lot of different conditions that happened.
Yes.
It wasn't just because, I just got sick of it and then, moved on. There was actually particularly on, his side with, his parents, there was an actual good reason for that to happen. Anyway, I went, oh, great. Whereas now, different eyes, you look at, different experiences, you wouldn't put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, who is he to judge? Oh my God.
Yeah, well, I don't know anything about that situation, his background or anything like that. But at 25, you want to do the right thing.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Make sure, okay, if this is what we need to do to get to there, we'll do that.
Yeah.
Different person today, though. I think you obviously wise up over the years.
Bizarre. In Singapore, I think the Catholic churches, they do have marriage encounter. So you do like a treat before you get married to see whether this person is suitable for you or not. But it is facilitated by married couples from the church. So that makes sense, right? I would say, okay, yeah, that makes sense, that you would do that. And then you have to do this thing called marriage encounter before you can get married in church, or else I'm not sure whether it's a hard rule, whether, if you don't do that, then they're not going to marry you. I have no idea. I didn't marry in church, so that didn't, impact me. But I think it's a good thing, right? That they do like a retreat. So I'm not sure how long it lasts, but at least there's some preparation. And there is no judgment like, is your marriage going to succeed or fail?
Yes.
God, it's more about whether you think, this is like the last leg before you enter the big race, right? Whether you're suitable or not, just to suss things out further. So, wow. To have someone...
Yeah, I was quite, I don't know, I was just not devastated, but just really upset the fact that, I remember thinking at 25, he gave his, that was a Catholic priest as well, when he gave us I suppose, not the final roundup, but just his input, on the last bit, and I thought, if anything, okay, if you're judging based on my background from my mother and my husband's background from his parents, without knowing all the circumstances, what took place, don't you think that we'd actually be looking at, let's not repeat our parents' mistakes?
Yeah.
Who's to say we're just going to naturally just repeat what our parents did?
But any marriage is 50-50, right? I mean, there's a 50% chance that it's not going to work, 50% chance it's going to work.
Yeah, that's right.
And no one is can say, and also it's a journey, right? And if, so many things can evolve in the
Mm.
marriage, and if both, go down the same track when they're evolving and healing and, learning and transforming, then, obviously it's going to work. But sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. We all grow at a different pace. We all work through our baggage differently. It's really,
Yeah.
really hard,
And, like, as you know, like, there's so many different twists and turns, whether you're married or not married. And I find myself in a situation now that I didn't think I was going to be years ago, as in, like, my children have grown up, great, I'd have all this time, I'd go and do all these things together and see the world. And, it's nothing like what I used to talk about, 20 years ago. But then, you don't know all the different twists and turns that, life has for you. You just only have to deal with the cards you dealt with at the time, you can. But, even with marriages that, are long term, they still go through all different changes.
Yeah.
So many ups and downs. And I've actually going through clients at the moment that they're just about to become empty nesters. The husband was just so full of, both of them were so full of enthusiasm, but now he's starting to get, there's a few ailments that's starting to come through. And so that limits their ability to do things, all the things that they used to talk about. And I thought, it doesn't matter where you are in life, at some point, married or not married, you still go through all these different challenges.
Yeah. And when you go through a different phase of life, like that's why in midlife, right, where people are preparing to retire or empty nesters, their jobs, or not so preoccupied with looking after their children, it becomes so much more confrontational, right? They're dealing with each other now. Like they've managed to avoid it for maybe decades even. And then now both parties have less things to be responsible for, so they're facing each other much, much more. It's much more confrontational,
Oh,
and
yeah,
it's a different
definitely.
phase of the marriage, right? I mean, if you can work through it, great. But I feel in midlife, that's where a lot of marriages also fall apart, and they may not necessarily leave the marriage. They'll stay, but they're not communicating. They're almost like strangers. They live in the same house because it's just too much trouble to separate or to divorce. They just say, okay, I'm years of my life. There's no point. It's too much hassle, right? So people just don't, they just let it be. For women, I think mostly also because of hormonal changes, right? The mental health is really suffering and obviously impacts the marriage, right? And so it can be something, it's almost like it's a ticking time bomb. It's almost like there's something brewing so deeply within their being, but it's not addressed because they've been busy with life, right? And then when they start to, at the stage like 45, where the hormones start changing, they're entering, premenopausal stage, then it triggers something really deep inside them, that maybe past traumas, past emotional stuff that have not been addressed. It comes up, it surfaces, and then it comes up as really strange behaviors that they normally would not display. And then the family members were like, whoa, what's going on here? What do we have here in our hands? It's like, this is a totally different person. But the change in the hormones, really does that to people. And I feel on top of, like, for women, right, going through menopause, having to take care of children, and then marriage, and then on top of that, we have what is happening in the world, right? That definitely impacts all of us. So there's huge changes happening right now. And so as an individual, when you're in midlife, there's a lot to handle. And I feel it's at this stage in humanity's history, I feel like when you're dealing with midlife issues or hormonal imbalances, it feels like it's much, much more challenging to deal with than maybe 10, 20 years ago, because so much has changed, right, in our world. We get our dopamine fix through our mobile phones, the food that we eat. It's, there's so much that's impacting us on the physical level. So, people who are going through these midlife crises and hormonal changes in a body, there's a lot more to deal with.
You've got the pressure of everything and, the finances, and, you really are reliant on, like, it's really hard to do it by yourself. you really do need, that help of that second person.
Yeah.
So when you're going through, changes like that, and I remember when I was going through the early days of my menopause, a lot of things changed because I was tired. And the reason why I was tired is because I was getting these night sweats and during the night and like insomnia. And I would just all of a sudden, I'd just be bam, wide awake in the middle of the night. And all of a sudden, I'd just start to go to sleep about 2 hours before I was due to get up for work.
Wow.
And so the problem was that it was my sleep that was causing my tiredness. And it was my hormones that was causing my insomnia. And
Yeah.
so it had a really flow-on effect. So the next day, you would tell me the sky is blue, and I go, no, the sky is grey. But you get a bit of sleep, and the view of your life and everything changes around you. 20 years ago, we didn't have the same amount of pressure on ourselves to compare to what there is now, and it's just like, oh my God, at what point? This whole 50 is the new 30 thing, that's great, but we're still tired.
I just wonder whether, it would be a good idea to start something like a support system. I mean, besides this podcast, right? Like a regular support system where people can get support for like physically, right? What they can do to help themselves. And then, support also for emotional, mental changes, whether we can actually do a structured course or structured online something besides this podcast. I mean, this podcast is free for all to listen to. But when you have something structured, right, and people are interested in something that they can rely on and that they know that there is information or there is Q&A, there is something that they can go to on a weekly basis or monthly basis, just to help them go through this period, starting from the age of 40 right up to maybe 60, that sort of a thing for this group. I wonder if that's a good idea.
Oh, that would be really good. It'd be interesting to see what other people think too and what could be, because we would think it's good.
Yeah.
But then, I can imagine how many people, are out there that are by themselves, for instance, that don't really have the support. I think that's a great idea. It'd be interesting to see what other people think too, and maybe some suggestions that they would like to sort of see included, because, in our profession, we could, in a summary, but, someone experiencing, problems and challenges that they might not have had the answer to, that would be really good to hear from them.
Yeah. So let us know.
Yeah.
Watching this, let us know if a community like that, which is a closed community, not open like YouTube, right?
No.
A closed community, then I feel people would be more willing to share what's really going on, get some, like a group coaching thing, coaching people through. I'm not sure whether there are any programs out there where they have menopausal or midlife group coaching. I'm not sure, where it encompasses, holistic care, not just physical, but emotional, mental. That would be perfect, right? Kind of support system. So let us know in the comments below if you're interested in a program as such. We'll be very, very happy to facilitate that and take it from there.
In our age group, where things start to, the family starts to go, and whether or not the person's by themselves, or just say they're by themselves, because that seems to be the most common problem, is that people have lost interest in eating because they can't be bothered, you know. And it's interesting, I fall into that category at times too, and yet I've got all my whole nutrition thing behind me. It's just, and I've often reflected to my mother, thinking, oh God, I remember my mum, she used to be a great cook, and then towards the end she was just happy with the peanut butter. What happened? Like not understanding all the different changes that she's must have gone through. I mean, I don't have a peanut butter sandwich for dinner or anything, but I will, I'd have a whole cupboard of all these, platters and plates and all the things that I would get, the family and do family dinners and that for. All of a sudden, they hardly ever get used now, and then so your skills that you used to be able to do when, the family were there start to change a little bit.
Yeah.
And, it's still great, to cook and to bring things together. And it's different if your family's close, but, there's probably a lot of people out there who might not even have family, or they might be at a distance. So, to keep that interest in food and, nutrition going. So, I used to find, with some of the clients, they'd say, I just can't be bothered, to cook for one. So I'd say, great, cook for two. because then the next night's
Yeah.
dinner, you don't have to.
That's what I do. I would sometimes, I don't mind cooking for one because I make it simple and I don't, and if I cook too much, then it's dinner for two. Then I would freeze the other portion, right?
Yeah.
But I don't mind cooking for one because it's not difficult. Actually,
No.
I would put, I have this glass pan or whatever you want to call it. I put rice, a bit of water. So I'll put fish or chicken on it, put some seasoning, and then I'll put it either, because I have a air fryer steamer thing. So it does both things. It steams and then it bakes the food at the same time. So I would use that. And then, throw in the veggies, or I make a salad. And it's easy, it's nutritious, it's fresh, and I think it's important to have the pleasure, even if you're alone, right? And if you don't want to cook for yourself, then buy something. Or like what you do, like meal prep, right? Prep once a week and then put it in the freezer and the fridge, and then you have food for the whole week. And yeah, definitely important to still enjoy, because what happens, I have noticed this also, if you don't eat consistently and you like on your own, you can't be bothered to eat, or you just eat something boring and you just, I have to eat because I'm hungry, but I don't enjoy it. And then when you go out and socialize, or you have a meal out, you then tend to overeat because you think that, okay, this is my chance to eat when I go home, I'm not going to eat. And then you overeat, and then that's not good as well, So the consistency, I feel, even prepping for one, I think it's important, It's doing something for yourself. It's self-care,
And I think it depends on people's goals. I hate the word cheat meal or cheat day, but it's one of those words that irritate me. But if you can use that approach, right, where it's having a healthier connection to food, so, you kind of do what you need to do. I always say, if you want to have it, but, eating consistently is what helps keep the weight off, within reason. So, not having, eating the right food. So lean protein and fresh produce. Okay.
Yeah.
And then heavy carbohydrates, I always say best utilized after your training. So you can still have them, but they're best utilized in the training. It will help speed up your recovery and results. So, you shouldn't be able to deny yourself any of the foods. It's just that certain foods might just hold you back from, if you've got something that you're working towards. If you're sort of consistent throughout all the week, and there's a day where you want to have an ice cream, it doesn't mean it's an open end, book for whatever. It's just learning to know that you can still have things without denying them. And you just got to be careful with that approach too, because some people could go really strict through the week and then overindulge on that day because they've binged eat, because that's the only time they can have something. And then they don't realise that all that binge eating on that day can really, undo all the... You remember when you said to me, do I have any favourite snacks, right, a little while ago? And I said, well, not really, because I don't really snack because I eat consistently. So we're going away for a couple of days just into the hinterland, and I'll get a packet of salted chips. Yeah. Because I love the crunch. I love the salt. I don't have them all the time, but I know there'll be a time in an afternoon I'll probably have a ginger beer and a packet of salted chips.
Yeah.
But to me, I look forward to that, because I don't, beat myself up about it, because I look really forward to it. I'm still doing everything else that I do during the day. Yeah. But that would be, my favourite little thing, because I find with all the meal prepping, which is great, but when you're putting things in the freezer, foods are usually soft. And after a while, you miss biting into something, the crunch or the enjoyment of food, and it just becomes a tool that you need to eat. And so it's learning to recognise when it becomes that you need a little bit more variety in your, in your day, whether or not you look at different recipes, just to mix things up a bit, because you need to get that satiety happening. So, which is really important. It comes to me at time, I go, oh God, I'm just so bored with food. It's just, oh God. And I thought, it's not that I'm just bored with what I'm eating. Let's pick some different recipes. Yeah. So everyone's exactly the same, including me. Yeah. So it's just learning to recognise it. Yeah.
Yeah. I need variety in my food. I can't eat the same thing every day. It drives me nuts. I need to cook it differently. Like if I were to eat chicken, I have to cook it differently every time. I cannot make it the same and eat the same thing. Maybe this is a trauma from my marriage, because when I was married, my ex would eat the same thing every day, and whenever we go to a particular place, then he would eat the same thing. So I need variety, and I would always, and that's the fun thing about cooking for yourself, right? You just cook it in whatever way you like it. Yesterday I went to the supermarket, so I bought just the green pesto, and then I bought tomato pesto, and I thought, okay, this is going to change things up for me. You use it as a dressing, you use it in whatever it is that you want to cook, right? It just changes the taste, but it's the same food that you're using anyway. It's the same chicken, it's the same fish, it's noodles or rice, right? And I think, changing the dressing or the sauce, it makes so much difference, to it gives you variety.
Oh, definitely. You've seen all my meal prep, so, which is great, but then there might be one dish. I remember chicken cacciatore. It's just so simple. And I'd have the chicken, and it's got, it's all there's all fresh herbs in there, and there's olives and capsicum, and there's some I don't put the bacon in or anything like that. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And I just remember the first time when I made it, it was like, oh my God, I can't get enough of this. And just a fresh, some, fresh beans, on the side.
With social media now, I think on TikTok, people are sharing recipes. On Instagram as well, they're sharing recipes of different things that they're doing. So there's this thing where I watched one where they were, cooking the same thing but in different ways. Like with cabbage, with eggs and avocado. So it's the same food, but they've done it differently. And it's really quite fun, to watch some of these videos. And even on YouTube, right? They have all these cooking recipes and make fast meals. The thing I like also is the one pot meal for one person, right?
Yes.
So you just get a simple rice cooker, you put your rice, you put your veggies. You can cook so many different things in that. And I think that there is a specific channel for that on YouTube, or was it TikTok, where this person does like rice cooker meals, and every video is different. So go try it out. It's fun.
Yeah, I'll be interested to have shared some go-to recipes.
Yeah.
Because that helps, variety. I've got a lot of go-to recipes, that obviously I can share. But it'd be nice to hear what other people are doing as well, because you get a library of things then, and people just want different ideas because they just need to change things up, and just to get that, that engagement with food again, and get excited about eating. And I think that's just what's missing.
I think so, because I think our palate gets bored. Yeah, because there are certain foods that that you can't do a better job than what you can get out there. You're not going to do it and ruin it for yourself. So just go out there and eat it, And
it's interesting because there's people I know that I've worked with in the past that say might not like vegetables, right? And so they've had to learn how to meal prep and do things in that themselves. And what it boils down to would be the way that their mother might not have been a good cook. So the vegetables have always been overdone, and I hate vegetables. Yeah. But I can see why there's problems. So then it's not the actual broth or whatever it is that's the problem. It's the way that it's been cooked is the problem. Yeah. So, if you're going to, of course it's going to be, unappetizing, and you just up with it. But if you've got something like they learned how to cook it properly, and even with a bit of sesame seed or just something, and they've gone, oh my God, I had no idea that it had this taste, because my mother had always overcooked her veggies, and we'd always been brought up with mashed potato. It's like a meat and three veg back in the day.
Yeah, and I think I'm also very lucky living in Singapore, right? I mean, Singapore is a really small country. It's also a melting pot, and everything is within reach. If I want Indian, it's just like 50 meters downstairs. I just go get it. If I want something spicier, it's maybe one bus stop away. I just take the bus down. So it is easy for me, at least here in Singapore, for me to get food and to get variety. And sometimes I find that I get bored with the variety that's out there. I want something really bland. And that's when I say, okay, I'll do it myself, right? Just a simple bland meal, like a miso soup, with rice and tofu and seaweed. And I'm happy with that. Something really light and simple.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll sign off now. So have a wonderful week, everyone. We'll see you again. This is Shamla Tan from Singapore.
And yes, and I'll piggyback on that. Have a great week, everyone. And this is Alina Anderson signing off from Queensland, Australia. Bye.